Welcome. Welcome to this week's Trinity announcements. We're so glad that you're here. And the two of us are here to do a little something today. My name is Pastor Lee. I serve as an associate pastor here at Trinity, and this is...
I'm Deacon Mary Lassitz. I'm the deacon on staff, and today we're going to talk about the differences between the two of us.
Excellent. We're going to do it in a bit of a game show. So for those of you who want to play along at home, we have 8 different questions, and the answer could either be pastor
or deacon.
So at home, you can vote as we do each question. So I think you have the first one, Deacon.
I do. Which is called by God to love and serve God's people?
We should probably hold up the answer and then talk about it, right?
Yes, you go first.
Well, pastors and deacons are called by God to love and serve, are both called to love and serve the church. A scripture that supports this is 1 Corinthians 12. Now there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there's a variety of services, but the same Lord, and there's a variety of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. So pastors and deacons are both called by God to serve God's church in the world. That's the pastor answer.
And it's the deacon answer. The difference, well, there's no difference because we're called to serve out into the world.
Yeah.
But we'll explain more of the detail, fine nuances as we go.
Perfect. Question number 2. Which position is under a call? Some of you may have heard this language before. Church people, rostered leaders aren't hired. We are called by a congregation. So the answer to who is under a call is both.
Both of us.
So you can go first.
So for me, and you'll learn not too different in the next answer, is when I'm graduating from seminary, I get my name into a hat for all the bishops to take a look at, and they decide if my skills match something that they need in their synod, or a congregation in their area has a need for somebody like me. And I go through what we have just seen me go through 6 months ago, is a call process where there's a series of interviews. And then at the end, the congregation decides to take a vote on whether they felt as a whole that the skills that I bring or the other, or whoever the deacon is, brings to the congregation. And then we end up with a call, which is basically a job in the congregation. Or for me, another nuance is too, I can have a call to an organization as well. And if that's the case, then I usually get the official call from the bishop's office, and then the synod council does the voting.
Perfect. Pastors are also under call. What that also means is people like deacons and pastors, we belong to a synod. Here we are in the Indiana-Kentucky Synod. That's the geography. There are 65 synods in the United States, and they figure out the territory by density of Lutherans. So, for example, in Pennsylvania, there are 5 synods, whereas here it takes 2 states to get enough Lutherans to make a synod. So we both are under a synod and under a bishop. And if you were in worship a couple weeks ago, you heard the good news that the Indiana-Kentucky Synod, that Deacon Mary and I were at the Synod Assembly. We voted in a new bishop who will begin September 1st, Pastor Tim Graham of Messiah Lutheran here in Fort Wayne. So he will be all of ours, but especially our new bishop.
Yes, and which is an exciting time for both Trinity English and the city of Fort Wayne, since the Grahams have lots of connections in both places.
Perfect.
Okay, so who needs a seminary degree?
For a pastor, our degree is called a Master's of Divinity. So the joke is, oh, you're divine after you graduate, which is not true. But you can go to any of the ELCA seminaries in the country or a divinity school. Pastor Erdos went to Harvard. There are any number of fine institutions to get this particular degree, Master's of Divinity.
Same goes for deacons. I had to go to seminary. but I get a Master of Arts degree. Depending on how we structure, because we tend to structure it a little differently sometimes. For myself personally, I'm only missing a few classes, Hebrew and one Bible class that makes my degree different from a Master of Divinity that Pastor Lee and Pastor Erdis has on their master's level.
Perfect. Number 4, who can preach? Both of us. Do I answer or do you answer?
I answer first. So I am actually called to word and service is the little language that's used for deacons. And as you notice, the first word in that is the word word, which is capital W, which means that I can preach. I don't very often, and especially in a congregation like Trinity English, when there are 2 pastors, they tend to fill up the schedule more often than I do, plus based on our job description. But yes, I can preach. And even when I was in calls to organizations, congregations, when I was there, had me preaching to them at times.
Excellent. Pastors obviously preach. The code language for a pastor is word and sacrament. So the same word is for deacon and pastor in our job description, and the difference comes in the second word, which we'll get to.
Okay, so who can administer the sacraments?
Okay, in this case, the pastor does that. So as I said, the code word, or kind of the code language in the Lutheran world, is pastors do word and sacrament. So Pastor Erdos and I, Pastor Jeremy, Pastor Judy, we, part of our lane as a pastor is communion and baptism. Now, we can have a theological conversation about emergency baptisms, but for the most part, we'll be the ones doing those particular things.
And then, which I just mentioned, so it was a great segue, was I'm called to word and service. The language, other than preaching and being able to assist in worship, the other part is service. Most deacons do some sort of service component where they tie the needs of the church to the world and then inspire the church to go out into the world and serve.
One of my favorite things about having both pastors and deacons on staff at Trinity is we have 2 sides of the same coin. So worship being the central thing we do together, worship and the word and the sacraments is where we experience God's grace given to us through Jesus. And then the deacons help us, what do we do now that we're loved, now that we have all this free time on our hands? Deacons are like, hey, let's go do X. So it's a wonderful combination. I'm so grateful that Trinity gets to have both flavors.
Yes, it is.
Question 6. Who has 1 foot in the church and 1 foot in the world to bridge the gap?
Well, we kind of answered that question, right? Deacons. I'll give a little church history to have a little nuance around this. Very recently, so I want to say in the last 20 years, a little bit about what we call in the ELCA, or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, if you're new to Trinity English, is we are also called rostered ministers. So there are several rosters. There's bishops, pastors, and deacons. But fairly recently, like in the last 10 to 15 years, the lay rosters, is which what deacons are, used to be deacons and associate ministries. So a slight nuance, when you come across a deacon, it can be 2 different types, especially if we're been in ministry long enough. Some of these current deacons could have been associate ministries at one time, and I was called a diaconal minister, so DIACONAL, which means diaconia and going out into the world and serving. There's very clearly that service component, but associate ministries often were church musicians, youth ministry, Christian ed type folks. They did a lot of things in the congregation. So deacons do a huge variety of things in the church, not just official, but always inspiring the church to go out and serve in some way and learn, or bringing the needs of the church to the world.
Perfect. Question 7.
Who has a specialty area? That's me. Here at Trinity English, one of my favorite passions in ministry has always been faith formation, evangelism, and stewardship. So I've been fortunate enough in my time as a deacon that stewardship has been something I focused most of my career on. And that's one of the fun things for me here at Trinity, that I get to focus on that here, which isn't just financial support of Trinity, which of course is important, but it's also supporting Rebecca and the pastors and everyone else on the benevolence that we do in the community, as well as trying to, get everybody inspired to participate in all these things. So the old language, right, is time, talent, treasure, right? Trying to figure out how we can take the love that we know God has for us and take that inspiration and go out and use it in a way that God is calling each and every one of us to use.
Perfect. And our last question is a logistical one. Who gets to wear stoles on Sunday morning? And if we each step sideways, you can see on the video. The answer is both pastors and deacons. We've even gotten questions about this.
Yeah.
Right? The difference obviously is just in the style. Pastors have a stole that just goes over our necks and hangs down this way.
And we do it diagonally across our body.
And it's just to differentiate who is what. So you can look and know
who's a deacon and who's a pastor. Yep.
So there are other differences and similarities, but today, thank you for the opportunity to highlight some of the bigger similarities and differences. If you have any questions, Deacon Mary and I would be happy to talk with anyone at any time, and both of us are so pleased to serve all of you and God in this place.
And thank you for all you do.
Have a great week.
Bye.